Bright Samurai Soul was oh so boring. But before I tell you why it was oh so boring, please consider this your spoiler warning because I will be talking spoilerish-ish. So you've been warned. So now let's get on to the review as to why this movie was oh so boring. But before I get into all that, why, oh why, someone please explain to me why we are having spin-offs or inspired by movies off of Bright, the live action starring Will Smith, if that movie was horrible. Or series, actually. Wasn't it a series? But anyways, I could only stand 30 minutes of it, and then I turned it off and didn't care to watch it. Maybe it's the orc, because everybody's into fantasy, and if you're into Dungeons and Dragons or the War of Warcraft, maybe that's the reason why we're having this niche and this genre. Maybe there is a niche for this stuff that I don't know about. But if there is, I don't know about it. But this movie was not it. The only good thing about this movie is the animation. I am a sucker for this style of animation. It's the drawing mixed with the CGI. I just love it. I think it's very unique. It lends itself for a unique experience, and with the right story, with the right voice acting, with the right plot devices, it's golden. You'll always, for the most part, most of the time, not always, most of the times, you'll enjoy it and time will fly. But this movie wasn't it. There was a few animation issues, especially when they're traveling, the orc and our heroes. Well, they're both heroes along with our elf, where they go into the grass, and when the orc goes in there, his feet just disappear. But then a couple frames later, the little girl and our hero go into the grass, and it subtly blends into the grass, and you see little errors like this throughout the movie. Now, maybe it's just me because I do reviews for a living, so it kind of lends itself to my eye. I just noticed it, and I'm like, like that math teacher back in your days when any little thing was marked off. If you didn't show your work, marked off. If you showed your work, came up with the right answer, but it was the wrong way to show your work, I marked it off. So maybe it's just me nitpicking, but I did find that a lot. Also, the soundtrack. What was up with the soundtrack? It's supposed to be a period piece mixed in with this fantastical element, but yet it had this Blade Runner futuristic kind of a Tron feel to it. It just didn't match good with the movie. It took me off of the movie. And as we all know, and if you don't know, now you know, is that the music makes the movie. And it's 2/3 of the movie experience, because like any genre, the movie builds you up, builds suspense. In a horror movie, something's popping up. In an epic thriller, it gives that that epicness. I mean, come on, what would Marvel be, or Transformers be, or any of these other movies? What would be Michael Myers or Jason without their signature, even Jaws for that matter, without those signature sounds that we are associated with them? And it just makes or breaks the movie. And for me, for this one, it just took me off. It was too dumb, too corny. It tried to be too much in a movie that should have been centered with more traditional instruments, with more of a traditional feel. And maybe it was by design that they wanted to move away from that. But with this type of animation, it suits you better to stick with what works with that animation. And I'm not saying be fully traditional, but have traditional music instruments that go with that era, or at least give it that feel with that genre. And this movie just went all over the place with its music. And also going back to the animation, there was some bad sequencing, especially the last scene on the boat. We find that our orc gets destroyed. He gets shot in the face. He kills, his master or his boss, as he calls him, and there's just a bloody scene in the front of the boat. So our hero goes in there and he has to battle his sensei, his mentor, and they go right back out to that front of the boat, and there is no bodies. Like, come on, this should have been caught in pre-production, post-production, at any point before this thing got released. Because you're like, wait a minute, weren't the other people just fighting that it should be a bloody mess? And our hero should have seen that and given him more of a motivation, not only for the little girl, because yes, he's protecting his little girl or the little elf, and taking her to where she needs to go, but the death of the orc that was with him in this journey should have given him a little bit more drive to finally get to where he does. Ultimately, we know that he gets killed, and it's the power of the elf, the little girl that's an elf. She brings him back, and ultimately she defeats his mentor, not him. So maybe they were trying to focus the story on the elf little girl, but it was just like I said, the sequencing was all off. The story was all off. It was basic. The script was horrible. It was so watered down that I don't know if Netflix thinks that we're just dumb and they have to dumb it down for us, but they dumbed it down too much where you're like, oh my God, this is like, it's a carbon copy of every other adventure movie that you've ever seen. But just because it's inspired by so-and-so, by Bright in this instance, it needs to make a difference. I don't know. Altered Carbon is probably the most similar that I've ever reviewed, from being a live action, and they had an animation, which is by chance very similar to this, but they did it the correct way. Even though it's more like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, in that type of animation, but that translated really good as far as following what the whole overarching plot of the story was, and they just added it with another different character in a different time to suit its narrative. In this instance, again, I don't know what they were going for. It just seems super, super boring. But maybe there's a niche out for it. Maybe some people there, out there like it, and this is becoming like a cult phenomenon. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Or is there a niche, or was just another miss by Netflix? But for me, this movie was a D+, and the plus is because of the animation. And if I could have muted the TV and just seen the animation told a better story than the actual story that the movie was trying to say. So for that's the reason it gets the plus. Other than that, this thing would have been a D-. But for right now, we'll leave it at a D+ because that's what I think it deserves. But anyways, those are just my thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And like always, that's a wrap.